As I'm recording this video, there are less than 3 weeks left in the 2023 Texas legislative session. And unfortunately, Texas House Bill 2744, the Raise the Age bill, is for all intents and purposes dead. Now, I get that there is a lot of chatter online about finding some way to revive it, and I get that. I have lobbied for a lot of bills over the past 16 years, and most of those did not pass. So I get that when you have been working on a piece of legislation for months or years, you keep fighting until sine die, and then you look for any way to get the issue inserted into any subsequent special sessions. That's just what you do, and I respect that. But the reality is that there is not a plausible scenario under which HB 2744 is going to be revived this session. And I waited to make this video until 2744 was dead because I did not want this being used as a piece of anti-2744 propaganda. Because I did want to see that bill get a floor vote, both because, one, I felt like we owed that to the family members of the 19 children and 2 teachers who were killed in Uvalde. And also because I felt like if we could get it to the floor, there was the potential to amend it into a bill that actually, would have the intended effect that actually could save lives and that might garner some bipartisan support. Now, I think even if we'd done that, even if we could have passed it out of the House, I think its chances in the Senate would have been very, very slim, but that would have been a great step forward. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So I want to talk about why 2744 in particular, but the raise the age bills in general were fundamentally flawed. Not the concept of raising age, but the particular bills that were filed. None of them were very good bills, unfortunately. And I wanted to kind of explain, from a relatively nonpartisan, relatively informed perspective, why we could do much better in crafting that type of legislation. And this is really why I feel like this type of legislation needs input from both sides, right? Like you need the people who have the ear and the support of victims' families. You need the people whose focus is gun safety, but then you also need the people who you know have the ear and the support of gun owners, who know about guns, who understand some of the unintended consequences of some of this language that we saw in some of the other bills. That's how I think we need to craft this bill. Now, my background is, I've traditionally been a political independent. Now, the past few years, I've voted almost exclusively Democrat, just because I kind of felt like the Republican Party ran off and left me with a lot of the culture war issues they've been pushing. So I've been voting Democratic for the last few years. But my background is as an independent, and I spent 10 years working with the collegiate gun rights organization Students for Concealed Carry. Now, I was never a paid lobbyist or anything like that. I was always a volunteer, but I was one of the founding board members of that group. I served initially as that group's director of public relations. I then served as their Texas legislative director, or their head lobbyist for the state of Texas. And then I spent a number of years as a senior advisor to the group. And I ended my time with Students for Concealed Carry back in 2017. And since then, I've actually worked with a number of gun control groups trying to help them, kind of understand the gun owner or gun rights perspective on these issues, help them craft legislation that is more likely to find bipartisan support, but B, will actually accomplish what they set out to accomplish. And that's the problem, with 2744 is I really don't think it would have saved any lives. And, back when I was with Students for Concealed Carry, a lot of what I did was train college students to talk to the media, talk to legislators, talk to other students about the issue, right? And one of the things I always told them, one of the very first things I would tell them was you should never say something along the lines of, if Virginia had had campus carry back in 2007, the Virginia Tech massacre never would have happened. I said, you can't know that, and you undermine your credibility when you make, blanket statements like that, when you make, emphatic statements about something you really can't know. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of the proponents of 2744 never got that advice, because we have heard a lot of them say that had this bill been in effect in 2022, those 19 children and 2 teachers would still be alive. And I think that's highly unlikely, and I'll explain why. I want you to imagine that we are living in an alternate reality in which 2744 has been passed by both chambers of the Texas legislature and signed by the governor, and is now the law of the state of Texas. All right. And what that law says is that it is illegal to sell a semi-automatic rifle that has a caliber greater than 22 and that is capable of accepting a detachable magazine to a person under the age of 21, unless that person is a member or veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces or a Texas peace officer. That's what the bill said. I want you to imagine that that's actually the law, okay? And I want you to imagine that there is a very troubled 18-year-old young man. He just turned 18 last week, and he, for whatever reason, feels like the world is against them, and he's going to make the world pay. And he goes to his local gun store, and he walks up to the counter, and the clerk asks him, "What can I do for you?" And that 18-year-old, he points to that AR-15 hanging on the wall. He said, "I'd like to buy that rifle right there." And the clerk says, "Well, now are you 21? Because I can't sell you that rifle unless you're 21." The kid says, "Damn, really?" Clerk says, "No, but I can sell you the pump action version of that rifle, or I can sell you the lever action version of that rifle." And the kid thinks about it, and he says, "Well, how much slower are those?" And the clerk strokes his chin. He says, "Well, I figure with the semi-automatic version, you're looking at maybe 2.5 rounds per second. With the pump action and the lever action, you're looking at maybe 2 rounds per second. So maybe, an extra half second per round." The kid says, "Are they just as powerful?" And the clerk says, "Yeah, it's the same gun. It's just they're pump action and lever action instead of semi-automatic." And the kid says, "Well, I mean, do they have the same magazine capacity?" And the guy goes, "Yeah, they take the same magazines. It's the same gun. They're just pump action and lever action." The kid says, "Well, can you reload them just as fast?" And the clerk goes, "I don't know how many times I have to tell you this. They're the same gun. You just pump them between each shot or rack the lever between each shot." And so the kid does a little math and says, "Well, deadliest school shooting in U.S. history was Virginia Tech, and that shooter fired a round every 4 seconds. The second deadliest school shooting in U.S. history was Sandy Hook, and that shooter fired a round every 2 seconds. And these guns are capable of firing a round every half second. So yeah, these should be plenty fast to do what I want to do." But he says, "You know what? I don't know. I really had my heart set on a semi-automatic." The clerk says, "Well, I have an AK style shotgun over here I can sell you." The kid says, "Well, is that as fast?" He goes, "Yeah, same rate of fire as the AR-15. Kid says, "Well, does it have the same magazine capacity?" And goes, "Yep, same magazine capacity." Kid says, "Well, can you reload it just as quickly?" "Yep, reloads just as quickly." "Well, what about the power? Is it as powerful?" And the clerk says, "Well, are you going to be shooting at long range or close range? Because at long range, it's not as powerful, but at close range, it's more powerful." And the kid thinks about what he has planned, says, "Yeah, close range, that might work." So the kid's looking at the 4 guns on the wall. There's the semi-automatic AR-15 that he can't buy. There's the pump action and lever action AR-15s, which he could buy. And then there's that AK style shotgun, which he could buy. And he's not sure. And he starts thinking about the different school shootings he's researched. And he remembers the deadliest school shooting, Virginia Tech, was carried out with a 9mm Glock 19 pistol. And he asks the clerk, he says, "Well, do you have any Glocks?" And the clerk says, "Yeah, but I can't sell you a pistol unless you're 21. The kid goes, "Damn." The clerk says, "Now, if you find a private seller, they could sell you one." The kid says, "What?" The clerk says, "Yeah, you could go down to the gun show this weekend or get on a message board, and it's perfectly legal for someone other than a federally licensed firearm dealer to sell you a pistol." So the kid says, "All right, I'm going to go to the gun show this weekend and see what they've got for sale." So the kid shows up at the gun show this weekend, and he notices most of the people there have got big, nice setups, and he talks to a few of them and finds out, well, they're all licensed dealers. He can't buy a pistol from one of them. But he works his way to the back, and there in the back are a few guys who, their tables are a little more sparse. They've got 8 to 10 guns instead of 30 to 40 guns, and no tablecloth, no big sign. They're just sitting there on the bare wood with their guns laid out, and he goes and talks to them, and sure enough, turns out these guys are just hobbyists. They're not licensed dealers, and therefore there's nothing legally prohibiting them from selling this kid the same Glock 19 pistol that was used to carry out the deadliest school shooting in U.S. history. They could also sell him the Glock 17 pistol that was used to carry out the 1991 Luby's massacre, which is still the sixth deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. The Virginia Tech massacre, as I said, was the deadliest school shooting. It was the third deadliest mass shooting. So the kid's standing there talking to the quote unquote hobbyist about this selection of guns that are available. And he's looking at the Glock 19, like the one that was used in the Virginia Tech massacre, and the Glock 17, like the one that was used in the Luby's massacre. And these both look like good options. But he notices there's an AR-15 sitting there, and he says to the clerk, he says, well, any chance you'd sell me that rifle? The clerk says, well, not unless you're 21. You got to be 21 to buy that rifle. The kid says, damn. The clerk goes, but if you're interested, I could sell you this. And he reaches under the table, pulls out another AR-15 and sets it right there on the table. The kid says, wait a minute. I thought you just told me I have to be 21 to buy an AR-15. The clerk goes, no, you have to be 21 to buy an AR-15 rifle. This is an AR-15 pistol. The kid looks at it and says, well, what's the difference? The clerk says, well, no difference. It's the same gun. It's just that the rifle has a buttstock and the pistol doesn't. And the kid says, wait, you mean it fires the same ammunition? Yep, fires the same ammunition. Takes the same magazine? Yep, takes the same magazines. Reloads in the same amount of time? Yep, reloads in the same amount of time. Same muzzle velocity? The clerk says, well, it's got a slightly shorter barrel, so you might lose like 200 feet per second. But, when you consider it's a difference between 3,000 feet per second or 2,800 feet per second, it's not really going to have any impact on the lethality of the gun. He says, but if you're worried about that, I can sell you this longer barrel for it. And he pulls out and sets the longer barrel there on the table, and that'd make it just as powerful as the rifle. And the kid says, so you can legally sell me the pistol and the longer barrel for it. He says, yeah, it's still a pistol even with the longer barrel. And nothing illegal about that. I'm happy to swap them out right now and sell it to you with the longer barrel. The kid says, wow, that might be what I'm looking for. And the clerk says, and if you really wanted a rifle, I could sell you a buttstock to go with it. The guy goes, wait a minute, is that legal? The guy goes, yeah, buttstocks aren't regulated. Rifles regulated. But I can sell you the pistol and I can sell you the buttstock, and you can put the buttstock on the pistol, and that's perfectly legal. The kid says, wait, so I can have an AR-15 rifle just by putting the buttstock on the rifle? The guy says, that's what I'm telling you. So, in that scenario, where the kid could walk into the gun store and buy, among a myriad of other guns, he could buy a pump-action AR-15, a lever-action AR-15, or a semi-automatic AK-style shotgun. Or he could go to the gun show and buy a Glock 19, a Glock 17, a myriad of other pistols, including an AR-15 pistol, which can very easily and legally be converted into an AR-15 rifle. Okay? Think about that. In this scenario, do you really think that a would-be mass shooter or would-be school shooter is going to be deterred because they couldn't walk into the gun store and buy the AR-15 that they originally thought they wanted? We've heard a lot of people say that they support 2744 because, the Uvalde shooter tried multiple times before he was 18 to get a gun and he couldn't get one. And so they think that if, you raised the age limit even higher, that would have kept him from getting one for even longer. But here's the thing. When he was 17 years old, he could not buy any gun, right? He couldn't buy a rifle, a shotgun, a 22 plinking gun. He couldn't buy a handgun. He couldn't buy any gun, all right? What 2744 would have done is said that there's one specific style of gun he can't buy, but it would have let him buy a variety of other guns that are just as deadly, right? So to say that, had 2744 been in place, that the Uvalde massacre definitely would not have happened, I think is woefully naive. There were bills like Senate Bill 145 that would have raised the age limit to buy any type of gun. However, this bill was 2 paragraphs long. It read like the author, wrote it in homeroom after forgetting it was due that day. Like it created so many problems that it did not even attempt to address. For example, the way this bill was written, it would have made it a Class A misdemeanor, punishable by a year in jail, to sell or give a set of kitchen knives to a 20-year-old. Now, that is not what anybody is pushing for, right? Like, that's not part of the agenda of preventing gun violence. Is we don't want to sell kitchen knives to 20-year-olds, but that's what this bill would have done, right? Like, under this bill, uh, a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old could have gone to the shooting range and rented a gun to shoot with their parents. They could have uh, inherited a gun from a relative who died. In fact, on the day before someone's 18th birthday, it would have been perfectly legal for that person's father to give them an AR-15, 300 round magazines and 1,000 rounds of ammunition, and that person would have been entitled to keep that gun, those magazines, and that ammunition for the rest of their life. But if their dad had done that on their 18th birthday, the dad would have been guilty again of a Class A misdemeanor, punishable by a year in jail and a $4,000 fine. Uh, you know, the day before that they turned 18, they could go to the shooting range and rent a gun or go take a shooting course with their family. After their 18th birthday, they couldn't have done that. If they were 9 years old, they could inherit a gun from their grandfather when he passed away, but when they were 19, they could not. Like there were issues that this needed to address that it did not address. You're not going to pass a bill through the Texas legislature that makes it a crime for a mother to give her daughter a set of kitchen knives when the daughter gets her first apartment, or that gives a 9-year-old more gun rights than a 19-year-old. Like, you need to account for these things, and this bill made no attempt to do this. So let's talk about how to improve on this legislation so that in 2025 and beyond, we're not repeating the same mistakes that were made in HB 2744 and SB 145, right? The first thing I would recommend is not focusing on semi-automatic rifles that accept detachable magazines and have a caliber greater than 22, which is what 2744 did. Now, that whole caliber greater than 22 thing, that created its own set of problems, because caliber technically refers to the diameter of the bullet, okay? And most AR-15s fire .223 and .556 ammunition, both of which have a bullet caliber of 22. So although I'm sure the author intended that caliber greater than 22 to mean a cartridge larger than a small 22 long rifle rimfire cartridge, which is what you would fire probably at summer camp or in the Boy Scouts or something like that. I'm sure that's what he meant, but he was setting up a very valid legal challenge under the argument that the law says caliber greater than 22, and an AR-15 technically does not have a caliber greater than 22. So that's something that needed to be fixed in that bill before it could be really an effective law. And then, like I said, focusing on semi-automatic rifles that accept detachable magazines, that as I explained, that meant that somebody could still go and buy a semi-automatic shotgun, like an AK style shotgun, that accepted detachable magazines. And I'm going to show you just a short clip of the damage that a 12 gauge shotgun slug can do to the human body. And this is not going to show you anything happening to a real person. This is a ballistic dummy that's being shot. However, I do just want to give you a heads up that if for some reason you think this might be disturbing to you, skip ahead 15 or 20 seconds. And this is what a 12 gauge shotgun slug from that AK style shotgun I showed you would do to a human body.
This is a human torso, but they customized it for me and put blue blood in this one. I like the different colors, but you can see up close just how realistic and anatomically correct these torsos are. It is a skull and everything you would see in a real human head wrapped in a layer of ballistics gel.
So yeah, I mean, anybody who thinks that the victims of a mass shooting or a school shooting would be better off getting shot with that than with an AR-15 doesn't understand a lot about ballistics. And in fact, a study from Brigham and Women's Hospital concluded that in the close quarters of a typical mass shooting, a gunshot wound from a handgun is just as likely to be fatal as is a gunshot wound from a rifle. And that's another category that is not covered by this bill is pistols, because although it's illegal for a federal firearms license holder to sell a handgun to a person under the age of 21, there's nothing wrong with a private seller selling a handgun to someone under the age of 21 in the state of Texas. And so, you are setting it up where this would-be school shooter could go on, an online message board and find someone selling a gun, or go to a gun show and find somebody selling a gun, and he would be eligible to buy, like I said, the Glock 19 that was used at Virginia Tech, the Glock 17 that was used at Luby's, or would be eligible to buy an AR pistol, which is the same gun but without the buttstock. And as I explained, it would be legal for that same person to buy a buttstock and put it on there, right? Like that's the law does not even prohibit an 18 to 20-year-old from owning an AR-15. It just prohibits selling them one. So if they have the AR-15 pistol and they convert it into an AR-15 rifle, which would take all of 2 minutes maybe to put that change out the buffer tube and put the buttstock on there, that would be legal. Now, if the gun had a barrel shorter than 16 inches, which most AR pistols do, that would be an illegal short-barreled rifle. But they could also swap out the barrel at the same time and make it in that, they could legally purchase a barrel. Barrels and buttstocks are not regulated. You can order them over the internet. You can walk into any gun store and buy them. They're not going to card you or make sure you're of age or anything like that, because they don't have to, because there's no age limit. And so, if somebody's looking to carry out a school shooting, they probably don't care if they have, an illegal short-barreled rifle. They actually might find it somewhat advantageous because it would be easier to maneuver in tight spaces with it. But yeah, if they were worried about the legality of it, they could swap out both the barrel and the buttstock, and now they've got a legal AR-15 rifle. And when you look at how determined, for example, the Uvalde shooter was to get a gun, to think that he would not have either bought, basically the shotgun version of what he wanted, or the pump action or lever action version of what he wanted, or that he would not have gone to a gun show and bought, either a semi-automatic pistol like the Glock 19 or Glock 17, or an AR-15 pistol. I mean, he had a lot of options there if he wasn't able to buy that AR-15 from a gun store. So, I think that's, very naive to act like this almost certainly would have saved those lives. I think it probably would not have. I think we just would have seen the same people die, by some other type of gun. And so, here's the last thing I want to talk about is I get that probably the reason, 2744 was limited to semi-automatic rifles that are capable of accepting a detachable magazine and that have a caliber greater than 22 is that the author thought that by narrowly tailoring that bill, he would meet with less opposition, right? Like he might get more Republicans on board if they thought, well, as long as an 18 to 20-year-old can still go out and buy all these other guns, I guess, it doesn't hurt to restrict this one gun. But the thing is, a lot of those Republicans know enough about guns to realize that this probably isn't going to save any lives. So if they're going to, cross their party or cross the NRA or anything like that, they need to really believe that this is going to save lives. And so if it's a bill that is more or less a gesture, it's kind of symbolic. We're going to ban the specific gun that was used in this mass shooting, but we're not going to actually make it that much harder to carry out that type of mass shooting. We're just going after the gun that was used in that mass shooting. I think you're actually going to have a harder time getting support that way. And, if you're not going to solve the problem by restricting, an 18 to 20-year-old's access to semi-automatic rifles, but you feel like you need to, you need to limit the bill to certain types of guns so as to minimize opposition. You need to look at what all the guns I just mentioned have in common, right? All right, let's say there's the AR-15 that was used in the Uvalde shooting, AR-15 rifle. There is the pump action version of the AR-15. There is the lever action version of the AR-15. There is the AK-style semi-automatic shotgun. There is the AR-15 pistol, which again is the same gun but without the buttstock. And there is a myriad of semi-automatic handguns like the Glock 19, the Glock 17, etc. How do you limit access to those guns? What characteristic do all of those guns have? And that is a detachable magazine. All right, all of those guns accept detachable magazines. Now, that's not to say that you can't carry out a mass shooting or a school shooting with a gun that doesn't have a detachable magazine. The Santa Fe, Texas school shooter used a pump action shotgun and a revolver, neither of which had a detachable magazine. So this is not a panacea for gun violence, but it's going to much more limit a would-be shooter than would just a ban on semi-automatic rifles. So that's my first advice. The next time this bill's filed, focus on any firearm that can accept a detachable magazine. And if you want to keep that 22 exemption in there, you need to exempt rimfire firearms with a caliber no greater than 22. All right, so they fire rimfire cartridges instead of centerfire cartridges. So, there's different ways you could word that, but limit that exception to rimfire cartridges, and then you do not create this scenario where somebody can argue in court that it was legal to sell an AR-15 to an 18-year-old because technically the caliber was not greater than 22. That makes sense. So that would be my main suggestions there. Now, as far as what else we could do to garner bipartisan support for this, I think there's one other carve-out that, I suspect that a lot of gun control activists would push back against, but it's actually supported by the evidence on gun violence prevention. In fact, the Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Violence Solutions has concluded that this is the most effective measure at reducing all forms of gun violence. Not, banning certain guns or registering guns or anything like that. What it is mandatory training, testing, and licensing of gun owners. Now, what form would that take? Well, what if for an 18 to 20-year-old to buy one of these restricted weapons, they had to first pass a training course? That would accomplish a few things. One, it would create a built-in waiting period. It would, force these kind of misanthropes who carry out these school shootings to go, sit through a class and be around people, some of whom might notice there's something a little off about this person. And it would, I think, greatly alleviate the concerns of a lot of Republicans who don't want to tell some of their constituents that they can no longer buy guns. In fact, you could even do this like we did hunter safety courses back in the 80s, when they said basically in that case, it was if you turned 17 after the law took effect. In this case, it would be if you turned 18 after the law took effect, that you had to pass pass a course. You could be the hunter safety course again. That was something I pitched around the beginning of the session. Let them go take the hunter safety course and, get 6 hours of hands-on training with, safe gun handling and stuff like that before they can buy a gun. Look, none of these proposals are going to stop every shooting, but these training requirements are extremely effective. In fact, when people talk about the effectiveness of banning guns, they usually talk about two countries. They talk about England and Australia, which, both ban semi-automatic and pump-action rifles, and England completely bans handguns. Australia heavily restricts handguns. And yes, both of those countries have very low homicide rates. However, both of those countries implemented those gun bans before they ever had a lot of guns or a lot of gun violence or a lot of mass shootings. So those don't necessarily serve as a great example here. Countries that might serve as a great example here are countries like Switzerland and the Czech Republic, which actually have thriving, gun cultures, allow people to own the same guns they're allowed to own here, but they use mandatory training, testing, and licensing of gun owners. And again, I'm not talking about licensing the gun. I'm not talking about a gun registry. I'm talking about saying that somebody has passed a course, passed a test, and is deemed competent to purchase and own a firearm. And if you had a bill that said that, before an 18 to 20-year-old can purchase a firearm with a detachable magazine, that they have to pass the hunter safety course or some other training course, I think people would be surprised how effective that would be at reducing the number of these types of incidents we see. In fact, if you look at Switzerland and the Czech Republic, which again allow the same guns that are owned over here, except they have that training and licensing requirement, they have lower homicide rates than do England or Australia, the two poster countries for banning certain types of guns. So when you consider that when England banned guns, they had less than 1/2 of the total number of guns we now have in the U.S. When Australia banned guns, they had less than 1% the total number we now have in the U.S. Those were very different scenarios. You can't necessarily transpose that from those countries to this country and think it's going to work the same. But, if you take the example of Switzerland and the Czech Republic, where a lot of people own guns, a lot of people own the same guns, and they're still allowed to own them, they just have to meet this requirement. That might work here. And I think if we used that and applied it specifically to 18 to 20-year-olds, and we said, all right, if y'all want to buy these firearms with detachable magazines, which are the type most likely to be used in a mass shooting, you have to pass this training course. I think both that is something that could have a very positive effect on reducing the number of those incidents we see, and that could really garner bipartisan support. And you have to remember, we've seen training requirements work in Texas. I mean, I mentioned the hunter safety requirement. You have to take a hunter education course before you can get a hunting license in Texas now. And since we implemented that like 35 years ago, we have seen hunting accidents drop by more than 80%. An even better example is, Texas's concealed handgun license and their license to carry program that was implemented January 1st, 1996. For 20 years after that, we saw that Texas concealed handgun license holders were convicted of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon at 1/9 the rate of unlicensed adults in the state of Texas. That means the people who were licensed to carry deadly weapons in public were almost 10 times less likely to be convicted of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. The training, testing, and licensing requirements really do work. Okay, they really weed out a lot of the troublemakers, and obviously they don't weed them all out, but we're never going to weed them all out. We're living in a country with more guns than people at this point, so we have to set realistic goals. And as far as getting something passed, I think that what I'm proposing here is a more realistic goal. I mean, certainly focusing on guns that can accept a detachable magazine rather than on semi-automatic rifles is going to cover a lot more of the guns that are likely to be used in these mass shootings. If we include some sort of path to being able to buy these guns for an 18 to 20-year-old who's willing to undergo training, testing, licensing, whatever, that is more likely to make Republicans vote for the bill. And I feel like I loved the tenacity of the people who were pushing the raised age bills this session, but I also feel like there was a lot of kind of idealistic naivete among them, that they really thought that once these Republican lawmakers heard the stories of Uvalde and of the people who'd lost kids in Uvalde and all that the lawmakers would really have no choice but to vote for these bills. And unfortunately, these Republican lawmakers are simply not, most of them are not going to vote for a bill if that vote might cost them their next primary election, right? Like, they want to be there to vote for every bill. They feel like, they have so many important issues that they have to address, and they don't want to give up their seat to address just one of those issues. And so, crafting a bill that can garner their support is critical. It's necessary to actually passing anything, right? Like, you can have your perfectly very strict, narrowly tailored bill that's just 100% in line with your ideology, but if they won't vote for it, it's not going to save a single life, right? So, again, my three suggestions for next session are: focus on any firearm that will accept a detachable magazine, not just a semi-automatic rifle that will accept a detachable magazine. Make sure that carve-out for 22s specifies rimfire 22s, so that you can't claim that centerfire cartridges like the 223 or the 5.56 are also 22 caliber, which they technically are. And three, include a provision allowing somebody who either passes the hunter safety course or some comparable course. You could create an original course, something tailored to this issue. But I think because the state already has the curriculum for the hunter safety course, because there's already a process for certifying those people who passed the course, that would be the most logical way to do it. Make it so that 18-year-old who wants to buy an AR-15 still can't go do it the day after his birthday, right? He can't go do it on a whim. He has to, it creates a built-in waiting period. It creates a process. He has to be able to sit through a class and, pass the test. And like I said, it won't stop them all, but it would certainly be an improvement over the system we have right now. And I think based on what we see out of countries like Switzerland and the Czech Republic, based on what we saw with the Texas concealed handgun licensing program during the first 20 years it was in effect, I think this would have a surprising impact on the amount of gun violence committed with firearms purchased by 18 to 20-year-olds. And so that's my proposal. I know this ran long, but I hope it was somewhat informative. And if you have any questions, reach out to me on social media, and I'd be happy to address them. Thank you.